In December of 2011, while burglaring a woman's home in the Florida town of Silver Spring Shores, 5 men, Waldo Soroa, Matrix Andaluz, Jose David Diaz Marrero, and 2 other unnamed juveniles, had thought they hit the jackpot every burglar dreams of. After the 5 men had finished searching the house for all the jewelry and electronics, they discovered what appeared to be a vase filled with cocaine, just sitting there on the mantel in the middle of the living room. It wasn't until later that day, when the men returned to their own home and had tested their newest product, that they learned the truth. The vase of cocaine they had stolen and snorted was actually an urn filled with the ashes of a dead man and 2 Great Danes. Once they realized the error of their ways, the boys discussed returning the urn, but decided that since their fingerprints were on it, the best course of action was to throw the urn into a river. Unfortunately for them, leaving fingerprints on the urn was the least of their problems, because they had left plenty of prints at the actual crime scene, and were soon arrested. As far as the public had known, the BTK Strangler had stopped killing in the late 1970s, but after having remained unsolved for over 30 years, lawyer Robert Beatty decided to pay an homage to the victims and write a book titled Nightmare in Wichita. The book was intended to be an accurate retelling of the events that took place surrounding the BTK killings. While writing the book, Robert Beatty received a letter in the mail from an unknown person who was concerned he wouldn't get the details right. The letter contained very specific details about certain murders, photos of the crime scene, and a driver's license of a murder victim. Turns out the letter was sent by none other than the BTK Strangler himself. Once Beatty made that realization, he contacted the proper authorities, and from then on out, police took over and continued communication with the killer. The BTK Strangler was more than happy to play along, as he thought he was untouchable. So he toyed with the police and sent many cryptic letters to both Robert Beatty and the police station. However, he became annoyed with the drawn-out process of sending letters to the police, so he wrote them to inquire about sending floppy disks instead. More specifically, he wanted to know if floppy disks could be traced. Well, in an unexpected turn of events, the police lied. They responded and told him that floppy disks are in fact completely untraceable. Soon after receiving the first floppy disk, the police traced it back to the home address of Dennis Rader, and he was arrested. Imagine the horror you'd feel if you found out that your significant other is wanted for murder. Well, for one bachelorette on a dating show, this plot twist was a reality. In 1998, Wu Gong had become wanted by the police for the murder of a man. Before officials could make an arrest, Wu vanished and stayed hidden for nearly 13 years. Not a single viable lead had presented itself in the case in years. He left the public as well as the police scratching their heads in wonder. But I guess being a fugitive on the run must make the dating game a little too difficult, because Wu Gong, under a false identity of Lu Hao, decided to seek help through Happy League, a Chinese dating show. Wu Gong was able to captivate the audience with his bubbly personality and his enchanting singing voice. However, his adorable disguise wasn't good enough to fool one viewer at home, who recognized him as the wanted man of 1998 and called the police, who promptly arrested him. Which is a shame, because Gong had almost made it to the season finale. In the late 1970s, citizens of the United Kingdom were forced to live in fear as an unknown madman, dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper, roamed their city streets. All the police knew about the Yorkshire Ripper was that he was a tall white male, and he would primarily target young female prostitutes, which admittedly isn't much to go on. For nearly 5 years, it seemed like the police were getting nowhere near catching this guy. That was until January 2nd of 1981, when Peter Sutcliffe was stopped by a police officer for soliciting with a known prostitute. During the standard police check, it was revealed that Peter's car had false number plates, and he was arrested. It just so happens that Peter was carrying the murder weapon of his previous victim. He planned on ditching the weapon after he used it on his next victim, the prostitute in his passenger seat. However, Peter's luck hadn't run out just yet. Against all odds, the police didn't discover the weapon on his body, so they were clueless that they had the Yorkshire Ripper locked up. Until later that day, when they caught Sutcliffe attempting to flush the weapon down the toilet in his prison cell. That is when Peter's luck had run out. We're all guilty of accidentally making a butt dial once or twice in our lives. And for some, an accidental butt dial can lead to an embarrassing situation. But for others, they can become incriminating evidence, which is the case for one local man in Lexington, Kentucky, who sought out to carjack a few vehicles. But much to his dismay, his plan was foiled by the little electronic in his back pocket. During his carjacking attempts, the Lexington man butt dialed 911. Not once, not twice, but 4 whole times, simply because he forgot to lock his phone screen. It goes to show, no matter how smart the device, human stupidity will always prevail. David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam, was an infamous serial killer known for his multiple shootings of people in New York during the late 70s. He was notorious for sending a series of bold letters to the police, which in return gained him an almost celebrity-like status. News outlets all over the world were reporting on him. To add more fuel to the fire, at the height of his activity, New York experienced a major heat wave and had a 25-hour blackout. It was chaos to try and catch him. The whole city was living in fear. However, the Son of Sam's twisted killing spree finally ended on August 10, 1997, after an eyewitness came forward after seeing a man carrying what looked like a gun just before she heard shots fired. The lady noticed that just prior to the shooting, she saw cops putting tickets on people's cars, and she believed one of those cars belonged to the shooter. Later, a small team devoted to the capture of the Son of Sam found out that only one car was ticketed on the whole block. That car belonged to David Berkowitz. When officers went to question David, they caught him leaving his home with a semi-automatic weapon, sealing his fate. Berkowitz admitted that if the police hadn't intervened with him that day, he would have used the rifle to kill another victim. He was given 25 years to life. While on the loose in 2010, the Angeles City Killer, known for his murderous robberies, had his face plastered all over Philippines news stations. The police were getting desperate. All they had was a photo of him taken from a security camera. What made the Angeles City Killer so terrifying was that he preferred to rob homes when the place was occupied. His system was to simply knock and wait until someone opened the front door. That's when things would get bad. As soon as the door was opened, he began shooting, usually killing every resident inside before he would steal all of their electronics. His system was so simple yet deadly that he left virtually little to no evidence, aside from the body count, of course. The police were stumped. Luckily, they were about to get the big break that they needed when a witness surfing the web recognized the Angeles City Killer by the photos on his Facebook profile. Police were called and Mark Dazan was arrested and charged with the murder of 9 people. In May of 2013, a Florida teen was about to learn a lesson about karma, and he was going to learn it the hard way. After having the police called on him for having attacked and beaten a 61-year-old lady, the Florida teen was on the run. He managed to hop a few fences, but soon found himself exhausted. Luckily, he spotted a kind man who offered to take the teen in and help him hide from the police. Once inside, the teen sat himself in the living room and told his story. The teen was so wrapped up in explaining how he was wrongly accused that he failed to notice the ham radio on the coffee table and the many photos of a man wearing a uniform. I guess it was time for karma to kick in because unbeknownst to the teen, the man whose home he had just entered was an off-duty officer who had just listened to this whole case on his radio. The officer cuffed the teen and the two waited on the front porch until backup arrived. The teen was later charged with aggravated battery. In February of 2008, 2 masked men armed with machetes burst into a bar and began threatening the staff and demanding all the cash the joint had. It wasn't until the 2 men got a good look at the customers that they realized their mistake. The place they were robbing was a popular hangout spot for a particularly nasty group of bikers. In fact, the place had over 50 officers in the building at the moment. Before the men could make a move for the exit, they were tackled to the ground and handed over to the proper authorities. Next time they'll know to be a little more familiar with the place they plan on robbing, if there'll even be a next time. Loose lips sink ships, a popular idiom that acts as a warning about the danger of having unguarded conversations. But not all heed the warning that this phrase preaches, which is evident by the culprit of an alleged home robbery in a Calgary town. In July of 2010, Officer Karanjit Miharu responded to a call about a possible break and entry. When he arrived, he was greeted by a hysterical lady who claimed to be a victim that had all of her valuables valuables stolen. Before the officer had time to inspect the crime scene, the lady received a call from her concerned father asking what had happened. Thinking she had just pulled the perfect crime, the lady explained in French to her father that the whole thing was a carefully crafted insurance scam, and that she had broken a window in her home and had hidden all of her valuables. Little did she know that she had just foiled her own clever ploy, because Officer Miharu, who was standing right next to her, happens to speak fluent French, as well as 7 other languages: English, Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, Arabic, and Gujarati. The lady was then arrested and charged with mischief. In a later interview, Officer Miharu was quoted saying, "She didn't expect a brown guy to speak French. By the end, I had about 10 pages of notes, and I said, merci beaucoup."